one other thing I want to say before I jump. The talk of reparations has come up a lot.
Yeah.
And I feel, nobody. Well, let me say this. I think Bernie, AOC, and Liz Warren. The other guys, it doesn't even matter. You know what I'm saying? They're irrelevant. But they really seem to dodge around the topic, especially when it was about the American descendants of slaves. And I would like your opinion on that. And one more thing before I jump, by the way. Also, you should have Ibram X. Kendi on. The guy, he wrote an excellent book called, hold on, it's right here, Sam. I'm sorry. I'm drawing a blank. It's called
Stamp from the Beginning.
Stamp from the Beginning, The Definitive History of Racist Ideas in America. It's a really good book. You should have that author on. It's a really good book.
We had him on Dope Boys. We had him on 2 Dope Boys in a podcast. And he should be on the list, yeah.
All right, appreciate the call. Well, I'll answer the question about the reparations. I mean, because from my perspective, I think the term itself is obviously a little bit loaded in the context of American politics, and I can understand why people in the Democratic primary want to avoid using that term. I think that's why Bernie doesn't want to use it. I don't know to what extent any of the other candidates want to use it. I do think that there are specific proposals, though, that I think you could support and talk about them. I mean, I guess, I don't know. It's a good question because I think on some level you could have proposals that would address the need for reparations. There's also perhaps maybe a more sort of like, I don't want to say psychological, but sociological need to indicate that we are that reparations are due. But certainly at the end of the day, I am more, I think the idea of specific proposals that address things like wealth disparity. And let's face it, there are reparations for slavery, but there should also be reparations for things like redlining. I mean,
and frankly, maybe the Native American genocide as well. But
well, yes, but my point being is that we're not just talking about things that happened 250 years ago or 150 years ago. We're talking about things that happened 50 years ago, 30 years ago. I mean, these are we've had a systemic disenfranchising of political power in this country, particularly of Black Americans and obviously Native Americans, but also an economic one, and not just a function of discrimination as we experience it socially, but in terms of just plain old finances. Home ownership is the primary driver of wealth in this country. And time again, the ability of African Americans to develop wealth through their homes has been limited, actively limited, not just by the private sector, but by government, by the government.
I think I agree with everything. I just want to throw a few other important things about this in really quickly. So one, everybody basically, like Bernie can and should improve his answer, but he's actually being relatively honest about this. People like Castro and Harris and Warren are just lying. They don't like reparations politically means, I think it's HR 40, which Tulsi Gabbard is a co-sponsor of. And it's a specific piece of legislation in the House to establish a commission and a process by which that can happen. So there's one candidate that supports that. Everybody else is being totally disingenuous or outright dishonest. And I think the really big problem, too, is that, like, if you go back to Barack Obama in, like, 2015, he dismissed reparations, like, totally outright.
Right.
And then he pivoted to, well, but if you deal with these systems problems, they'll have a disproportionate effect on race, which is actually what Bernie said in 2016, which was insufficient then and insufficient now. But the incredible thing is that that's literally what Harris and Warren and Castro are doing, is they say they're giving the exact same answer that Obama gave, but then saying they support reparations. So my actual real irritation here, in addition to the disingenuousness of the politics towards Bernie, is I think you're undermining both arguments, because you do not want to create a frame around programs like Medicare for All that they're a form of reparations, because they are not. They are universal programs, period. And then on the other hand, you don't want to undermine a very specific case about historical injustice of African Americans as a universal program. So that's and the last thing I'll add is I think David Brooks coming out and supporting reparations as a form of collective psychological acceptance is an indication of how dematerialized these conversations can get, that we should be aware of.